Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us this evening Mr. Harry Gross. Welcome, Harry. You've been here a number of times.
Happy to be back.
I like to say we have two representatives of different cultures and different age groups, and in some ways different viewpoints. But it's a useful conversation, I think. Well, I know, Harry, that this is one of your favorite days. This is Bastille Day. And maybe that's a good reason to discuss the French world and its contributions to us and the world. And I hope that the French are doing the same somewhere on the 4th of July. I hope somewhere in provincial France there's some benighted figure that's discussing the USA on July the 4th, at least in a neutral and indeed favorable way. I'm not sure that would be the case, but it could be. Well, all right. So the French have been there a long time, and they rose in different circumstances. The Franks took over the Roman world. However, they interchanged. They fought. They did this. They had this. They did that. And the Brits, in many ways, were different. And our relationship with the Brits, I think, are closer. And longer, and our culture, the cultural imprint of the British, I think, is stronger. But we get a lot of, I think, good ideas and insights from our French cousins. Indeed, the Statue of Liberty is a precedent. They have their own viewpoints. They have their own way of doing things, which maybe we could learn something from. And they've got a lot of, I guess, cultural issues and icons that are, or at least jokes are made about in this part of the world. I will make one comment as we start our discussion. I think a big difference is the Protestant Reformation and how that sort of, the UK became a Protestant country, although there's a terrible civil war that took place and often bad things happen. Nevertheless, the impact of the Protestant culture was quite strong there, and less so in France, where there was an effort. It came, you could say, close to becoming a Protestant country, but it did not happen, and so the Catholic story stayed there longer, and their mercantile situation, it was more of a continental kind of place. The mercantile situation was not the same as the maritime UK was. One of the things that happened is as far as excessive population. We're here in the USA. I mean, huge numbers of people left. Britain less so for the French. There are many reasons to think they were different culturally, and one of the big things that happened was the way the French swung back and forth between different political viewpoints. If they have kings, no kings, they guillotine people, they to the barricades. They have the Marseillaise, they have Napoleon, they have all kinds of things and all kinds of events, and they fight with the Germans, and they have this and they have that. And they have a very distinctive cultural situation. Now, I will now ask you to pick out some things that are good that come from France. After going that, I mean, what can we learn from the French? What are some things that are good with the French?
Well, I think to start, I mean, you mentioned some things that we take from the French as a country, and most of our political philosophy of the early republic comes from the French. The idea of separation of powers is Montesquieu. You have
I mean, it was an idea, but I don't know, did it really take place in France? I mean, it was an idea, but I'm not sure that I observed much of that, if I could ask that. The idea is there.
Well, the ideas are all there, but now the question is, how well does the revolution implement them? And it's questionable. The revolution then becomes subverted by itself and becomes a bloody mess that leads to the restoration of a new dynasty in the form of the Bonapartes. But the basic political philosophy that underpins the revolution is the same political philosophy that underpins the United States. And then you look at something like the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and it is one of the most important documents in human history. This idea
with
that for
the
the
American
first
influence
time,
strongly on that document.
well, it's marginal though, because it goes far beyond the American influence.
No, but nevertheless, the idea was, Thomas Jefferson was floating around. We had a lot of input into the idea of the U.S. I think was had a powerful. It was a powerful thing, and particularly the idea of no kings, and along with that, no aristocracy. I think that was we were locked together in that regard, I would say.
Well, I wouldn't say we were locked together. I think the French went far beyond the American experience. Jefferson may have had some input, but the Declaration of the Rights of Man is a uniquely French document.
Well,
and it is
Jefferson
a uniquely
played
French contribution to the world at that point.
Okay, I'll let it go at that. But I think the U.S., our experience, I think, influenced that. And I think I'll accept the idea that, yes, it did go a lot further. And so and you could say the excesses of the French Revolution swung the world back into the orbit of kings in a way. I mean, I'd say that. They had these ideas, and the way they instituted them, it was a difficult task, and their task was much more difficult than in the U.S. It was a lot easier to implement our particular ideas on government and quote, democracy than the French. They had well, there are many reasons, but everybody was there. And what are you going to do with your aristocrats? They're floating around. And in general, I think when a revolution takes place, a really violent revolution, as theirs was, and not to say ours was not. I mean, we certainly did lots of things here. But what are you going to do with people that are the icons of a whole nother viewpoint? And just having them in the room was difficult, which is one of the things that takes place with revolutions. When a status hierarchy is ingrained in people. And, I think the instinct of a peasant to, I don't know, take his hat off in the face of the Lord, or his master or whatever. That was a strong thing, and it's psychologically strong. And what are you going to? How can you get past that? And a lot of it requires a violent activity to get the old order out of there, and that's indeed, I think, what happened. So, in a way, we have different revolutions, and it's a whole PhD story, isn't it? How do you describe our revolution versus the French Revolution, and then what can we bring out of it? One of the things might be the excesses of the French efforts towards democracy, the things that happened that maybe it would have been a milder way to have accomplished something, and they went through periods. I mean, you could say, I don't know, 1794 or so. The idea of the thoughts that were on the streets of Paris, the ideas, whatever, they're very out there. But also the idea of class enemies. So there was a class enemy kind of part of that story, which I think you can certainly see when social orders are ruptured and changed. The idea of class enemies is pretty much in evidence. And maybe that's one of the things that happened in the U.S. We certainly, our story is confused, and who can say what the story was? It's certainly the ins and outs. You're a different person than I am, whatever. You're a good person, you're a bad person. We had so much room here. People could move around, the influence of the frontier. And I don't think we had the same kind of class warfare that existed in France, and indeed how the idea of being in a particular class, I think, is part of the French psyche. I would submit that. Less so here. There's an argument about it, but I think pretty much the door is open more open in the U.S. than it might be in France. And maybe that's too strong of a statement. It might be too strong. I mean, maybe would you disagree? Or?
And I would disagree about the class system to some degree. I mean, that is one of the lasting legacies of the Revolution, is that it did much more to create the concept of an equal citizenry under the law than the American Revolution ever did. The idea of equal citizenship under the law doesn't come about until after the Civil War in the United States. The American Revolution largely maintains the social structure as it was. It makes some kind of, at the time, quite radical changes, but it doesn't overhaul society. The French Revolution is complete starting from scratch and creates a much more egalitarian society that lasts for a good bit, where you are able to mobilize far more of your population to do things. I mean, if you look at the revolutionary armies of the Napoleonic period, they are far more reflective of the actual makeup of the country than the armies of any of the other warring powers at the time. And it was kind of a uniquely citizen-driven initiative. And I mean, to this day, I mean, it really isn't until the colonial period, the end of the colonial period, where French society begins to break down. And it's not so much around class lines much as it is around racial lines, and is it around areas of origin in that sense. You get the division of society along whether you're a Maghrebi, whether you're a West African, whether you're from Indochina, and that's largely.
You mean after World War II?
Yes, yeah, the end of the colonial
period.
Well,
I mean, one thing I think we touched on that I think would be interesting is the French have grappled with the idea of getting past the feudal world. They've grappled, how can we get past the feudal world? And in many ways, the linchpin of the feudal world was the idea the king was anointed by the church, and this was sort of God's agent on earth. I mean, that was maybe the feudal story, and then the whole class of people marched to that drummer, and they were the sort of the enforcers of the king's law or the king's opinion, but in many ways, and so we had this sort of the peasants, and then we had the nobility, and it was pretty hardwired, and hardwired by all kinds of ways. The way that people spoke, their accents, their social relationships, and particularly their access to money or paying taxes. So if you were a noble person, you presumably would fight for the king in a war, so the taxes weren't. We had, a quite different system. And how that system changed or made efforts to change, it had sort of a bumpy way to do it. So you mentioned the whole thing that happened with the French Revolution. Okay, we had this period. Then we had Napoleon. We had the Code Napoleon. So we had a whole different structure and the breakdown of the traditional provinces into districts, so if you want to say that. And so a whole tremendous, a huge change trying to get away from the old feudal world. But then the Bourbons came. So, and we went back the other way, so things went back. Then revolutions in 1830, 1848, and then finally, Napoleon's nephew became the head guy. Then they were smashed up by the Germans, and they lost Alsace-Lorraine. Stuff happens. They're jumping around. They get a colonial empire, all kinds of. They have tremendous, which is, I think, something to talk about, is their sense of aristocracy or coolness, if you want to say that. People that spoke French, it was some kind of higher culture. They were more civilized in a way than other countries. Their notion of art, literature, cleverness, civilization, and in many ways, English was sort of a barbaric tongue compared to the French, as they had the light in Paris. So all these things were going on. But what I finally, from my little meandering around, what I wanted to get to was finally what happened. Well, how are you going to treat everyone equally, if you can, as part of their triad of their big slogan there, equality? Well, that means that everybody is treated the same, and there's no kind of, which might be something for us to consider in the U.S., there's no particular racial breakdown of whatever. We're not going to give 3 jobs to one person or 2 to 1 or whatever. Their education system is, well, it's your score that counts. You have a big score, a bad score, or whatever, you're just going to respond that way. And so one of the things that interests me is the way the French, their egalitarianism is a pretty, in many ways, useful marker. Everybody is going to be treated the same. Now, I don't know if that's possible in the U.S., in our variegated world, but I think it's a good pathway. That's my opinion. And I think when you start to make exceptions for people, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, or you didn't have a fair start or whatever, going to try and rig the vote for you. Well, of course, the people that can really rig the vote are the big dogs. So if you accept the idea that your deal in life is going to be rigged in some ways, then that's an anathema, I would say, in many ways to the French, at least their system. Now, that's too much of an assertion. I mean, that's too strong of a thing to say. But, I think that's one thing to consider. Another thing about the French is defeat. How the French have handled defeat. And they've gone up and they've been cast down a number of times, rather like Southerners, if I could say that, or the Civil War. No, I mean that. The impact, at least on Caucasian Southerners, about the Civil War, whatever their deal is, that Atlanta's burnt, whatever economic situation, lots of things happen, and the French had their loss of World War II is pretty catastrophic. And it also played on this class system, which, interestingly, I said, well, they're so equal. And then I'm also saying they've got a strong class system. And one of the things which they're sort of working their way through is how you come up with one people. And it's very hard, isn't it? Well, those are some thoughts about that. Do you have a rejoinder, or maybe you've got a different viewpoint?
I would say that to compare the French to Southerners is entirely unfair to the French people.
Oh, really?
Southerners lost one war and crafted a whole lie about why it was fought and how they lost. The French have lost far fewer wars than they've won, but they've had some big losses. You go back, if you look at French identity, it is centered around this idea that there is this kind of omnipresent endurance and resilience, that no matter what happens, they just keep getting back up. If you look at the 100 Years' War with England, France loses that, 2 of the 3 phases of the war. They lose to Edward III. They lose to Henry V. Henry V is king of France. Henry VI, his son, is crowned king of France. But they win the 3rd phase. They outlast the English. They outspend the English. They take back their land. And it's a slow march of progress. They fight civil war after civil war before finally unifying what we would now call France together. And then World War I, I think, it is a bittersweet victory in that sense, that they're hounded by the humiliation of their loss in 1871 to the Prussians. But even in the peace, it's so vindictive that it sets themselves up with the scars of the war to lose pretty quickly in the next one. But they come back, they keep fighting. It was the French government that let them down, not the French people. If you look at the Maquis, you look at Free France, you look at Charles de Gaulle, France continues to fight even amidst defeat.
Oh.
The only real place where it actually accepts defeat, and even so incredibly grudgingly, is in the colonial space. The retreat from Indochina leads pretty directly into American involvement. The French drag us in there. The battle for Algeria is one of the most brutal campaigns, and the French are forced out at great cost to themselves and to the Algerians. But the French don't take defeat lying down.
I think that's fair. I'll make a comment about which is an issue of consequence. I mean, I would like to say we're pretty much in the camp of Britain. I mean, I think that our relationship with Britain is quite father's son, or maybe illegitimate son, whatever you want to say. We're very close related, closer than with the French. Nevertheless, it's there. But I think we have to remember William the Conqueror. So, and I was talking about the sense of aristocracy that the French has, the language. So in our conflict back and forth, William the Conqueror brought over, although you could say he was Norman, he spoke the French of the time, and many French people came over, and there was a tremendous social structure change in the UK, where all the old Anglo-Saxon lords and aristocrats and earls were replaced by William the Conqueror's buddies, and the cultural imprint of the French on England, it's a house or is it a mansion? And so the whole cultural arrangements were imprinted by that, and the relationship between the two countries has gone back and forth. Now, I'm fond of making this comment. Many people say when the French are there, that's our oldest ally. The French are, where they helped us in our Revolutionary War. They certainly did. We would not have won it without their help. And this, in a way, I think the English might look as being traitors. I mean, they're cousins over here, allied with their oldest enemies, and the ability of the colonies here to have an independent country depended on the vanquishing the French in the French-Indian War, and in any event, the French sort of did the English in by allowing a great treasure. They used their fleet. And they really wouldn't, I think it's fair to say, I don't believe we would have won the Revolutionary War without their help. And the other card to fall here is the amount of money the French put into the Revolutionary War. So you could say, well, what are some things about the French that we could comment on? And it's that they really helped us win the revolution. I mean, it's just they were the sine qua non of our independence. And then the payment for this was in many ways, their economic circumstance. They were bankrupt, there were all these problems, and at least the initial tactical cause of the French Revolution was the idea of getting taxes. So the Louis had to call in which they hadn't done for a long time, sort of a primitive parliament. And once the parliament was to get some tax increases, and once the parliament was there, then the cat was out of the bag. And so there's a relationship going back and forth for a long time. And I think we could say the French cultural impact was pretty extraordinary cultural impact. And also they leaped ahead in many ways, and medicine is one of them. So the advances they were making in regards to germ theory, all kinds of great things the French did, almost as a sort of a display of energy after all the ups and downs the country had. They lost this, they lost that. I think you correctly said it. They have a great resilience and also a certain self-confidence. It's a pretty hardwired self-confidence about their situation. And I think one thing would be, maybe you can comment on this, I think a very difficult social class arrangements. I'll go back to what I said earlier in conflict. One was, well, they treat everybody the same, but on the other hand, their class systems are so powerful. So the world and the impact of the Nazis, 1940 taking over, and the country was, I think, fairly divided, and a substantial part of the country were so upset with the socialists, if I could say it that way, let's see, what are the socialists and the communists had a a union. They were, what was that called, Harry? Their relationship was big. I can't quite remember the name. You should, though. Your brain is a lot more.
I'm visualizing
it's okay
this
for me
logo.
not to
We've
remember
got
the name, but
I mean, this is after the Paris Commune, so
no,
the
way
actual-
after. No,
yeah,
the Great Coalition or some number like that. Well, anyway, and so the French property classes and the old aristocrats who maintained their deal. They've got they try to maintain it. They've got their social clubs. They've got this. The army is pretty much in their camp, and the idea of serving in the military was a big deal. And maybe that's the Dreyfus affair, which the general staff, and I'll ask you to comment on that in a second. But the general staff was pretty much the aristocratic families that went back a long way, who had the tradition of military service, and they were the officer corps. And Dreyfus was a Jewish guy, and the cultural tensions in the country really flared with that. Yeah. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Dreyfus affair is one of the kind of great tragedies of French history, of European history, in some ways, of a total gross miscarriage of justice. Because Dreyfus was Jewish, and I mean, at the time, there's this, the 1880s, 1890s sees this just renewed surge of anti-Semitism across Europe. You have the great pogroms of 1881 to 1883 in Russia. You have persecution in Germany. You have persecution in Poland. And Dreyfus was seen, because he was Jewish, he could not be loyal to the French state, particularly because his family was German. That he must be an agent of a foreign power, and therefore when intelligence is discovered to be being passed to the Germans, it has to be a Jew's fault. It has to be this man who is inherently disloyal. Never mind the fact that another French officer confesses to the crime.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Esterhazy. It took him a decade to be pardoned and exonerated, even after someone else already confessed the crime. And it so divides French society. The major parties are the pro-Dreyfusards and the anti-Dreyfusards. The anti-Dreyfusards being the anti-Semitic League of France.
Or the issue, I think, is beneath the surface. It's the in group, the out group. It's just always there. The people that are different in some ways. I'm going to cast whatever aspersions on them I can complain, well, my foot hurts today, it must be your fault, you're the out group, and that's just such normal human behavior. And maybe the situation was encouraged by the alteration of societal dynamics with urbanization, industry, change, and then and the people that are often the most, they respond to change the best, they make use of it, or people in the out group. And so, all kinds of other traditional venues are blocked. There are other people there, but there's no one, shall we say, that are making movies or maybe doing, I don't know, stock market deals as far as that goes, or anything that's part of this change that's going on. And there was, I think a lot of this anti-Semitism could be explained by that. And I'll just leap ahead to say we have our own issues and own problems with this. And it looks like we're about finished here, time-wise.
Our 2-minute warning, yes.
2 minutes. Well, all right, Harry. I will. We've bounced around the block a little bit. I'll ask you to make a final wise comment for you. I mentioned, Bucky has a large fan base. Possibly you have one equally as large.
We're hoping it's growing.
To address your large fan base.
I think when we look at France and its relationship with the United States, we are fortunate to have had, for the most part, a very good relationship with the French. And for a state that has such a long history as France, I mean, there are very few countries in the world that can really claim to have a millennia-long history of kind of stable consecutive governments. And France is on a very short list with that. At the center of European politics for since the Middle Ages, since the late antiquity, really, with the Carolingians. when we look at what France has given the world, it is political contributions with some incredible ideas of how radically different we can remake society in a way that benefits humanity. It's given us incredible art. It's given us incredible food, incredible music. It is one of the, I think, greatest contributors to the advancement of humanity of any country that has ever existed.
Well, that's a good. I'll make one last remark myself. Well, it shows the complexity of the human condition, and so the fact that there are people that are cousins, they're close, they're not quite in the house, so to speak, and they've got their way they do things, and we can learn something from them, it along with learning something, their antipathy can take place. Why is there antipathy? And a lot of that, I think, may go back to a subtle envy of the French, a subtle envy of them, and their great self-confidence and the things they've accomplished, and maybe the wisdom about the way they live and their sense. I mean, when they see an American, we're the Greeks, we're the Romans and they're the Greeks, and so there's a certain, we're the new people, we've got our own viewpoint, and there's, I think, dismissive of it, which should cause some kind of re-examination on our part. Well, all right, Harry, thank you for your comments tonight, and we'll talk some more.
Always
Thank
a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.